wisdom. And you'll find it interesting, I think, that in two of the cases, woman is personified as she, which is kind of cool. First is from the Buddhist Perfection of Wisdom in 8,000 Lines. I pay homage to the perfection of wisdom. She is worthy of homage. She is the source of light, and from everyone in the triple world she removes darkness. In her we can find shelter. Most excellent are her works. She makes us seek the safety of the wings of enlightenment. She brings light to the blind. She brings light so that all fear and distress may be forsaken. And the Hindus tell us in the Garbhuta Purana, wisdom makes a person honest and virtuous. It enables you to better the condition of friends and family. Wisdom is the holiest of holies, the God of the gods, and commands the respect of crowned heads. The fixtures and furniture of your house may be stolen by thieves, but wisdom, the highest treasure, is above all stealing. Finally, from the Jewish and Christian traditions.
From the book of Proverbs, chapter 4, verses 6 and 7. Don't give up on her, and she will never give up on you. If you love her, she will protect you. Wisdom is supreme. So acquire wisdom, even if it costs you everything. Get understanding.
Today I want to talk about something that people sometimes call thinking outside the box, or moving outside the grid, jumping the rails of conventional thinking. And sometimes it's just called a paradigm shift, or coloring outside the lines. But regardless of the words you use, I think it might be better if we demonstrate it rather than explain it, because sometimes words themselves are kind of blocks. Okay, suppose someone says to you, make a smiley face out of this picture. Well, most people would put a little smile and two eyes in there. But if you're willing to go outside the lines, you might get or suppose someone has given you a grid of 9 dots like this. We've got 9 dots, 3, 3, 3. And they say connect all the dots with only 4 straight lines. How would you do it? Well, you know, you might try 1, 2, 3, 4, but then of course you're missing the middle one. You might try 1, 2, 3, 4, but you're still missing that one. And you might try 1, 2, 3, 4, but you're still missing one with 4 lines. It is possible to connect all the dots in the grid with 4 straight lines, but you have to look beyond the grid to do it. Okay, here's the grid. And here's doing it with 4 straight lines. Ready for another one?
Yes.
If I gave you this Roman numeral, the Roman numeral for 7, and I said add 1 line to make it 8, what would you do? Yeah, you just add 1 line. If I gave you the Roman numeral 9 and said make it a 6 by adding 1 line, how could you do that? All right. Well, that would make it 11. But you're thinking, you are thinking outside that. Here's one way you might do it. Incidentally, by starting with a Roman numeral that just needed a line to make it go from 7 to 8, I set you up to be thinking of an answer within Roman numerals. If I had just said, can you make this 6, you might have figured it out by adding a line of some sort. Here's even another one you could do. 1 times 6. That's like way out there. Now, why is any of this important? Well, a lot of the things we now take for granted came about because someone saw something differently and jumped the rails of conventional thinking, so to speak. For example, take Post-it notes, all right? Such a simple thing, really. But before the 1970s, we didn't have these. You may be interested to know how they came about because it happened in the church. In fact, it happened because of a sermon. Well, the problem was it was a sermon that someone fell asleep in, but still. In the winter of 1974, Arthur Fry, who was an engineer, he was at 3M's Paper Products Division. He happened to be in a seminar with another engineer, and this particular engineer who was speaking worked with with glues and pastes and other adhesives. And this engineer had come up with a glue that didn't stick very well. And most of his audience couldn't see the good in that. I mean, including Arthur Fry. What good is glue that doesn't glue very well? But one Sunday morning, when Arthur Fry was at church, an idea came to him. You see, Arthur sang in his church's choir, and he used to put little slips of paper in the hymnal to mark the songs that they would be singing. Only the slips would often fall out onto the floor, and then he frantically paged through the hymn book to find the right hymn, find the right place. No big problem, but a bit of a hassle. Well, one Sunday morning, when the minister's sermon was going on too long, Arthur's mind was wandering, and it occurred to him that a weak glue would be perfect for making a slip of paper making it into a reusable bookmark, because the glue would be strong enough to hold it in place in the hymn book, but not so strong that it would tear off the page when you took it off. And the Post-it note became one of the most widely used office products in the world. And I know because I use it all the time. So sometimes a boring sermon can be a good thing. At least if it leads you to come up with something you would not otherwise have thought of. So if I see you your eyes glazing over today, I'll content myself with knowing that you're inventing probably something. Here's another example of coloring outside the lines that I especially like, because it involves creating something positive out of something negative. In 1941, a Swiss engineer named George de Mastrel was hunting with his dog in the mountains of Switzerland, and he and his dog kept getting those prickly burrs on their coats, and they're just so hard to get off. But de Mastrel thought that it was kind of a fascinating thing, how they stuck so firmly. So he brought some home, and he examined them under a microscope, and found that they were covered with little tiny hooks. And he realized that it could be very useful for fabric if he could find a way to copy it. It took him 8 years of trial and error. But he developed a product that's now used in kids' shoes, adults' shoes, luggage straps, and aboard space shuttles, and orbiting satellites, where there's no gravity to hold things in place. It's extremely useful today. Some of you may even have it on your shoes. In my robe, which I normally only wear for weddings, has it inside, so I don't have to button it all up. And he named it with the first syllable of 2 French words, velour and crochet. So these are the words for velvet, crochet, and he called it Velcro, which means velvet hook. And here's one from the 1960s. Bob Kearns was driving his Ford Galaxy in Detroit, Michigan. This was November of 1962, when it started to rain, but only slightly. So he turned on his windshield wipers, which in those days had 2 speeds, fast and slow. Fast for really hard rain, slow for moderate rain. But the rain was so light that even the slow speed didn't work because it would go, and he thought, why can't a wiper be more like an eyelid? You know, kind of like blinking. And now, it might help you to know that Bob's vision wasn't the greatest. When he had gotten married 9 years earlier, a flying champagne cork had hit his left eye, impairing his vision somewhat. And now as he was, straining to see outside the windshield in the drizzle, he thought about his eye, his bad eye, and his crummy windshield wipers. And that's when the idea came to him for an intermittent windshield wiper, which most of us now have on our cars. And made him a millionaire. I could have thought that. Now, what I find interesting in these examples, which I actually chose for the simplicity, we could have talked about synthetic fibers like rayon being developed out of spilt photography liquid. That's a very interesting story. Or tires being developed from rubber trees. But what's interesting, I think, is that none of these three people came up with something that had never been seen before. They just applied something to something new. Arthur Fry, for example, didn't invent the weak glue. Someone else did. He just thought of a clever way to use it in Post-it notes. George de Mestral didn't invent the prickly burr. It was just a part of nature. He probably wasn't even the first person to examine it under a microscope. Probably some biologist had done that before. No, he came up with an application for it in everyday life. And Bob Cairns didn't invent the windshield wiper. He only thought of an intermittent speed that would make driving in the drizzle a little easier. I also think that's interesting. Each of these inventions came out of an annoying situation. You know, slips of paper falling out of your hymn book, prickly burrs getting attached to your clothing, and windshield wipers going, If it weren't for things that tick us off, a lot of useful things wouldn't get invented. Now, at this point, you may be thinking, okay, so thinking outside the usual boundaries can make for some clever inventions, but is it good for more than that? And I'd say yes. In fact, every religion in the world started that way. Every religion started by coloring outside the lines. Later on, these religions don't always encourage it, but in the beginning, all religions are invitations to think outside of custom and convention and see things in a new way. To give just a few examples, from Christianity, Jesus heals people on the Sabbath. That's outside the grid. You're not supposed to work on the Lord's Day. He touches lepers and sinners, and he lets them touch him. A holy man shouldn't be doing that. Way over the line. He talks to women, alone even, like the woman at the well, who's a Samaritan besides, all no-nos. And he makes a Samaritan the hero of one of his parables. Samaritans aren't even Jews. They're outside the box. Jesus is coloring way outside the lines of his day and inviting his followers to as well. Or consider the Jewish tradition. In the Talmud, there's Rabbi Hillel. The Talmud says a Gentile once came to ask him if he could tell the whole Jewish law while standing on one foot. Now, a previous rabbi had sent the Gentile away, but Rabbi Hillel said, yes, I can tell you the whole law while standing on one foot. Whatever you don't want done to you, don't do to anyone else. That's the whole law. Everything else is footnotes. What a radical notion. Way out there. So it's there in a lot of religions. And when you think about it, hasn't every important reform movement started as a jumping the rails? The abolition of slavery, the civil rights movement, public education, the environmental movement, women's rights, gay liberation. This very congregation itself, Sacred Journeys, was also founded on jumping outside the rails. all of these were by people who looked outside the boxes of their day and said, there has to be a better way. And have no doubt, the people most in need of learning how to think outside the box usually don't even know they're in a box. If a box is a really good one, you won't know you're in it. It'll just be a reality as far as you're concerned, not a lens for interpreting reality. One of my favorite examples of this, incidentally, you know, the camera that's filming this, they couldn't find a tripod, but they found a music stand and extended it up, and it's working perfectly. That's an example just before the service of people coming up with a new way to do something. All right. My favorite example of this is from the old TV show All in the Family, which is still on some of the old Cozy and New TV, I guess. And it has Archie Bunker, who sort of lives in a bunker or has a bunker mentality. Well, they had a riddle on one episode, which some of you may be old enough to remember or have seen in reruns. A man and his son are driving in their car to the grocery store when they're involved in an accident. Both were taken by ambulance to the local hospital. The son's injuries were such that he required immediate surgery, while the father just needed to stay overnight. And as the boy lay on the table in the operating room, the surgeon entered and approached the lad and said, "I can't operate on this patient. He's my son." Now, how is this possible? Any of you, do you remember this episode? No. Okay, someone does, right? Well, those who haven't heard it, seen it before, how might it be possible? Any ideas?
The mother.
Yes, it's the mother. The surgeon is the boy's mother. And back when the show first aired, I'm sure very few people knew the answer. Now it may not be quite such a surprise, but it's an example of how thinking inside the box and coloring within the lines can keep you closed off. That's what bigotry is, basically. But you know, it's putting people in a box and not allowing yourself to see them outside it. And so I would ask that you think carefully about the boxes you may have that you might not be aware of. Are there people, for example, that you assume could never do a certain thing, could never achieve a certain goal, could never fit anything other than the box or grid you built around them? Are there ideas you've never allowed yourself to consider because they didn't fit in with the beliefs you now hold? Especially the idea that I could be wrong. Are there things about yourself, limits you've put to what you could be? Maybe because of things you were told as a child. Things that you could perhaps begin to question now. Consider a few other people who were certainly put in boxes but rose beyond them. Did you know that Winston Churchill failed 6th grade? Did you know Albert Einstein was 4 years old before he was able to speak? And 7 before he could read? Can you imagine what a slowpoke they thought he was? Isaac Newton was rated as a poor elementary school student, and Thomas Edison's teacher told him he was too stupid to learn anything. And of course, Beethoven's music teacher said, as a composer, he's useless. I guess what I'm asking is, are you willing to be surprised about people, about ideas, about yourself? I'm not saying you will be, but are you at least open to the possibility? I have a little example from my own life that I didn't think much of at the time, but later I got that it was kind of an interesting idea. I was many years ago when I was in college and graduate school, I would hitchhike across country. And I wouldn't do that now. And even when I did, I had second thoughts. But I was driving in a car with someone, and a few other hitchhikers actually, and the car was making a clunking noise, and it was very dark out, we were on the highway, and he said, I need to check to see what that clunking is. And I thought, don't ask me, I know nothing about these things. But anyway, so he pulled over to the side, he got the lid open, and he couldn't see because there were no lights. It was very dark. So he took out a cigarette lighter to look inside, and I thought, that can't be a good idea. But the headlights were still on, and I thought, if only we had a mirror, we could use a mirror or a couple mirrors to reflect the light in there, and then he could see. And then I thought, well, it wouldn't have to be a mirror. Tinfoil would work pretty well. I said, you don't have any tinfoil, do you? He said, no. He keeps tinfoil in the car. And I thought, well, it wouldn't have to be tinfoil. It could be white paper. A bunch of paper. And then I thought, it wouldn't actually have to be white paper. It just have to be light paper. Like pastel colors. And then I said, do you have a map? And he said, yes. And we took out the map, and it worked beautifully. It reflected the light from the headlights all the way up and into the engine. Now, just for fun, here's a kind of an amusing example of coloring outside the lens. Someone was once taking a class in physics, and it came time for the test, and she came with a question that said, using a barometer, how would you figure out how tall a building is? And there is a way to do that, if you've studied physics. But the person taking the test had no idea. Should she just leave it blank, or should she try to think outside the box? Now, here are some of the ways you might use a barometer to figure out how tall a building is. You could climb to the top of the building and lower a string with a barometer tied to it, down to the ground. And when the barometer touches the ground, you measure the length of the string and add it to the length of the barometer. That technically would be using a barometer to figure out how tall a building is. Or you could put suction cups on your hands and feet, and climb up the building, and as you do, use the barometer as a ruler. Now that's still using it. It's very time consuming, but you can still be using it. You could also go to the top of the building and drop the barometer off and see how long it takes to crash to the sidewalk. And that at least would be somewhat scientific, because you'd be using the scientific law of acceleration. Or, and this is my favorite, you could take a barometer with you and go into the office of the building superintendent and say, I'll give you this barometer if you tell me how tall this is. Now, all of these are ways of using a barometer to figure out the height of a building, though they're way outside the box that the physics professor had in mind. Just for fun, I'd like you to try a little exercise with me that may help you get used to seeing things outside your normal frame of reference. This is one I learned at a workshop on creativity. Think of a number 2 pencil. Try to think of as many uses as you can for a pencil with an eraser at one end and a lead tip at the other. Now, I normally have you write them down and then we share them, but to save time, just raise your hand if you have uses for a pencil. Anyone? Yes?
I've used all.
To what?
I've used all the pencils there is to use.
You've used all the pencils there are to use? But what would you use it for besides writing?
Oh, drawing.
Drawing. Okay, very good. Drawing. Anyone else? While you're thinking, okay, go ahead. Yes.
I have poked holes in paper with the tip of the pencil when I needed a hole.
Yes, this is great for poking holes in paper. Also, if you have like tinfoil or something on the top of the lid or something, you could put in some holes to give air to it in case you have a plant inside or something, or candle. Yes.
I cut the erasers off, or taken the eraser off and used it as a little stopper on the back of hook earrings.
All right, yes. To use, take it out, and if you have, as an interesting earring, if you have a hole, you put that in there. You want to hear a few others that other people have now asked you? Okay, you can use it to write, you can use it to turn pages. You can roast marshmallows with it. You can rewind cassette tape. Now, we don't it works perfectly. And you can make a cross out of 2. You can stir things. You can fill a hole. You can clean walls. This actually is pretty good. If there's a little work on the wall, use the eraser without the water and all that. That works pretty well. You can use it to push something. You can hold up a window. You can stick up a plant. You can dial a phone. Not only the rotary, but the other. You can work a calculator. You can touch or push something hot so you don't get burned. You can sketch or draw. You can build things. Someone told me they use them to make dolls. And of course, you could earn money by selling them on the street corner. Any other ideas? Go ahead. Yes?
If you're planting seeds that don't need to go very deep, not very big, you could plant a hole. Maybe it's got to be 6 inches apart so you can pencil down.
Oh, very good. All right, so if you're planting seeds, and they need to be, maybe this far down, you do this, and then you can use the pencil to measure where the next one is so they don't grow overlap on each other. Thank you. Who else has it? Yes.
Back in the day, you use it on your SAT test.
Your SAT test, right. Right, very good. Very good. Yes.
You could use it to hold on to the string of a kite.
You can use it to hold on to the string of a kite. Very good. You can also... No, if you're good at this, you're good. You trust me. Any others? You can throw it. You can use the eraser if you want to dot paint. If you want to paint something and you need a lot of dots on it. You can use it to make a mustache between your lips and your nose. You can use them as knitting needles. You can use the shavings to help start a fire. You can use it as a plumb line, with a string. You can use it to trace a credit card. Put the credit card and paper over it, and you can go like that. You can also use it, I've seen this in a couple of movies, including North by Northwest. If you want to find what someone has written on the sheet by the telephone, you do this, and the air wherever it had pressure will show up. You can drop it as a distraction. You can use it as a mood booster. You can take rust off of a car. You can break the foil on top of a pill bottle. You can put holes in a jar lid. Use as a spinner for spin the bottle. Use it to sign up for something or to clean battery contacts. You can even use it as an axle in those little round boxes where you tie a rubber band around it and you spin it around and then you let it go and the axle makes the ball turn around. It's cats love it. If your this one came up, someone came up with this. If your contact lens pops out into the bathtub, put toothpaste on the eraser and use it to pick up the lens. Now, I haven't tried that yet, but I'm going to. Any others? Yes.
You could use it to measure the growth of your children or grandchildren as they...
Yes, use it to measure the growth. And the nice thing about a pencil is you can erase it even on the wall. All right, here's a few others. Let's see. You can use it to fix a broken leg on a chair. Just use a string or rope to connect the two pieces together with the pencil on it. And then use the pencil as a tourniquet to tighten it. You can use it just as a tourniquet, as a percussion instrument, as a scale, two things on either side, you see which one weighs the pencil down. If you have holding up, you have something here and something here, whichever weighs it down more, it's a good scale. Someone told me she knew someone who carves the lead in the sculptures, and someone else told me she and her friend used them as dueling swords in school. And the teacher punished them by making each write, "I will not duel with my pencil," 50 times. So you can use the pencil as a punishment. You can also use a pencil to make carbon paper. Just pencil in one side of the paper, and then when you write on the other side, the print will show through to the next page. You can use the pencil to make a candle. I've done this before. You have, let's say, a glass or a jar or a can, and you put, you need the wick in there. You pour in the wax and the wick, and you let that stand up there on the lid of the thing, and the wick will stay in, and that way that helps you make a candle. You can use it to take a test, poke someone, a fake cigarette, a pacifier, a stick in your ear, a stick up your nose. I like to do that at restaurants sometimes. A lot of people I know use one to get your shoe on. It's a shoehorn. To hold the garden, to dibble for seeds, erase marks from the table, as a back scratcher. Anyone ever used it that way? All right. As chopsticks, you can use it as an award or a prize. As shish kebab, poke hole in paper, hang things from a wheel to roll things along, and it does work. You know, it works better on the floor, but it does roll. And you can use it as a weapon, of course. Now, you and I are a little bit like that pencil. You know, Mother Teresa once said, she often said, she was only a pencil in God's hand. God did the writing, she said. She was only the instrument. And I kind of like that image. You and I are pencils in the hand of God. Or if you don't use God language, you are a pencil infused with the spirit of love, whatever your theology is. Only pencils can do so much more than write. I mean, as pencils, when we're pencils, we can stir things up. We can help start a fire. We can roll things along. We can hold up a window. We can support growing things or clean up a mess. We can plant seeds, scratch a back, erase mistakes. We can create beautiful pictures and solve mathematical problems. We can help people put on their shoes or bring food to their lips. We can be weapons, or we can roast marshmallows. There are so many things we could do or be if we'd only look behind the lines that we or others have drawn for us and see the many uses we have. And likewise, think of what other people might look like if we were willing to look beyond the boxes that we or others have enclosed them in. Beyond black or white, male or female, young or old, gay or straight, liberal or conservative, what might we see? And what other things might we do in our lives if we could see that a map could be a mirror, a music stand could be a tripod, a pencil could be a chopstick, and an enemy could be a friend?